We're going to start the recording now, and I'd just like to welcome you again. This is Olivia Hampton, president of the Palmetto chapter, and we're so very happy to have you join us today. We're in for a treat with Filip Hendrickx from the Brussels chapter, and I'm going to let him introduce himself, and please stick around if you can. We are going to have a raffle at the end. Filip is an international speaker, trainer, author, and we will be raffling off a few of his latest book. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to hand the controls over to Filip. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this kind introduction, which for me is already quite comprehensive. It explains what I'm doing at this moment. I have a technical background, but I've evolved into business analysis, business architecture, and innovation throughout my career. And those are topics that I really like to share my experiences on and speak about. So thanks very much for inviting me to talk. I am getting calls from a Nova Scotia number, which may be related to
what we will do, let me just pause the recording here.
Benefits mapping. Let me start with a quick question for you, and I have to put this back here. Does anyone know, and please provide your answers in the comments, does anyone know who this person on the right side of this picture is? And if you don't know, then please say, I don't know, because then I know that at least you have been thinking about it. Belgium manager, yes, I think that's going in the right direction. It is indeed a kind of manager in Belgium. It's actually the coach of the Belgian soccer team. And he's been quite successful. Roberto Martinez, perfect hardball, very well. In 2018, when we participated in the World Cup, we did quite well. And we actually won against tournament favorite Brazil. And at the end of the game, Roberto Martinez said, I have never lost a game on the tactics board. Now you have to know that I actually met Roberto Martinez at some point in time, and he's a very friendly and modest person. It's not like he thinks he's the best coach in the entire world. He still made this strong statement. But he went on to explain to the journalist that he wanted to praise the entire team for their superb execution. And for me, that quote stuck, because ultimately that's what it's about. Strategy is interesting, but it is only in the execution of strategy where you turn those ideas, those goals, those ambitions into reality, into something that actually works in the real life of your organization. So if your execution fails, your strategy doesn't matter anymore. Your strategy is slideware at best. And companies struggle with this. If we look at some statistics, these are older statistics, but still companies deliver on average only a certain percentage of what their strategies promise. So the strategy's potential is much higher than what companies actually achieve. And if they could close that gap between strategy and execution, the gap between what are the goals we strive for and what do we actually achieve, if we could close that gap, companies would become much more profitable. They would perform 60 to 100% better in many cases, which is quite impressive. And I invite you to think about this yourself. If you look at your own team, your own product, your own project, is it clear what the strategy is? And if so, do you have the feeling that you are achieving 80, 90, maybe 95% of those strategic goals? If yes, perfect. But in a lot of cases, that's not what's happening. And that's what closing the strategy execution gap is called. It's trying to make sure that whatever you build, whatever you deliver, whatever process optimization or system that you create helps you achieve those strategic goals. And this is a challenge where I believe business analysis can play a key role, because BAs are involved in project initiation and in project execution, where strategies are turned into reality. And this is also where benefits mapping can play a key role, because the benefits map gives you that overview on one single page of where are we heading on one hand, and what are the solutions that we are going to develop on the other hand, and how are they connected. And so that's one of the reasons why I really like benefits mapping as a technique. It helps me give a big picture overview of what a project or any initiative is about. It keeps you focused on the goals you are trying to achieve. And it also is a very easy tool to use in a workshop, because you can, for example, using Post-its, create a benefit map together with your stakeholders, discuss it, see where you align, where you have differences of opinion, and try to make it clear for everyone and get everyone on the same page about any initiative. So in this presentation, I will walk through what I call lean strategy execution, which is a 3-step process to make this work, to close that strategy execution gap. First, we're going to pin down the goals. What are the goals we are trying to achieve? Then we are going to think about the enablers, the key elements that will help us actually achieve those goals. What do we believe we need to make those goals reality? And finally, because we cannot predict the future, you are never sure that your solution is going to work, is going to give you those benefits. So you need a kind of feedback loop. That's where the lean part comes in. And we will be using the benefits map as a tool to help us through this process. All right, so let's dive in. First step, pin down goals. Get the strategy clear. This quote, this tagline comes from a certain company. You press the button, we do the rest. Any ideas, and please put your suggestions in the chat, any ideas what this quote, which company coined this quote? Staples is a good suggestion, but it's not the company I'm looking for. Neither is Apple. Kodak, that is very good. Brilliant. I've actually never had someone find out this so soon. I don't know if you Googled it or just knew it, but that's a nice one. So this is actually the commercial, the graphic that came with the slogan. And there you can see that it's an old slogan. It actually dates from 1888. So in 1888, Kodak used this slogan. And why do I use this example? A lot of companies come up with very high level goals. A very good example is let's improve the customer experience. Our strategy is to improve the customer experience. Now, that is not a bad strategy. I think it's in most cases a good strategy, a good idea to improve the customer experience, but it doesn't give you any guidance. And it also doesn't differentiate you from other companies. Most companies are in some way trying to improve the customer experience. So it doesn't give you the competitive advantage that you are looking for. And this example, the Kodak example, shows that already in 1888, companies were trying to improve the customer experience, like Kodak. What Kodak did was trying to make photography as convenient as the pencil. So that's really customer experience back in 1888. So as a company, if you state your strategy, you have to be more precise. You have to provide more guidance so that your projects and the people in your projects, the team, knows what direction they need to head in. You need more detail than just something high level, something vague as improve the customer experience or increase sales or decrease costs. Those are relevant, but too generic. And a simple technique that you can use to discover whether or not a strategy, a goal is clear enough or is too vague is the strategy sniff test. And this helps us find out the right side of the benefit map, the goals and sub-goals. And the strategy sniff test goes like this. Can I make the opposite choice without looking stupid? So take your strategy, take your goal, and ask yourself the question, can I make the opposite choice without looking stupid? If the answer is yes, then the strategy is a good one, in the sense that it gives you some additional detail, because the opposite choice would also be a relevant choice. If the answer is no, then the strategy is too vague, too high level. It doesn't give you the guidance you need to make your project team actually work on the project and know which direction to go. And if we go back to the example of Kodak, Kodak's strategy was to create a camera that was so easy to use with a single button. You press the button, Kodak does the rest. In order to get people to take a lot of pictures, and thus Kodak to make a lot of money. That's one strategy. Another strategy could have been, we want to create a camera that allows to take pictures in any good circumstances, whether it's dark or light, whether it's a fast moving or slow moving object, whatever the context, whatever the situation, the picture should be decent. And if we do so, we would get people to take more pictures, and thus we would be making more profits. So those are two examples of valid strategies. You can take both, either is relevant, either makes sense. And it's a clear choice that Kodak made to say, we go for the single button camera, which is very easy to use. And it's okay if not all pictures are perfect, because people can take a lot of pictures very easily. So the strategy sniff test is kind of a trigger to help you reflect on, is the goal that is stated here, for example, in a project charter by our stakeholders, does it give us that specificity? Does it give us that guidance so that we can make relevant choices while we are developing the solution without going into too much detail? The Kodak strategy doesn't say what type of lenses need to be used, for example. That's up to the technical people that know best how to deal with lenses. So it still leaves a lot open, a lot room for implementation choices, but it gives you that guidance, it gives you that direction. And that is a first key thing about the benefit map. Finding ways to make the goals and the sub-goals explicit and in such a way that you can put metrics on them. So an example that I've used from a company that provides services around safety at work is this one. We want to grow revenue from non-mandatory services. That was their original strategic statement for a part of their business. If you apply the strategy sniff test, it doesn't completely fail. It's better than we want to grow revenue, period. Any company that is a for-profit company wants to grow revenue. No company would say we want to decrease our revenue in most circumstances. We want to grow revenue in and of itself does not pass the strategy sniff test. We want to grow revenue from non-mandatory services already provides some additional information, some additional direction, which is good. But after a few workshops, we could fine-tune it to something better. By 2017, we will double the revenue from non-mandatory services by better exploiting existing products and services at our current customer base. So this strategic statement gives a lot of direction. It gives a lot of guidance for the people doing the work that need to turn that idea into reality without specifying the exact solution. It doesn't say whether you are going to do mostly online or offline marketing, for example. They leave it up to the people doing the marketing. It doesn't say which products and services. Existing ones, yes, but are we going to invest in all products and services? Are we going to focus on some of them and leave others as they are? So there's still a lot of room for interpretation, room for different solution alternatives, which is very important. You don't want to prescribe all the detail within your strategic statement, but it still gives you that guidance so that projects can actually move forward in a clear direction. And so that's the first part. If you want to create that benefit map, have a good conversation, a good discussion around the strategic goals, make them smart, check them with the strategy sniff test. Once you have done that, you can move to a more detailed level, which is what I call the enablers, the key elements that you believe, that your organization, that your stakeholders believe will make the strategy come true. And again, here I'd like to start with a small question. Can you guess, can you drop a number in the chat with an estimation of the number of candies in this bowl? How many candies do you think are in the bowl? I see some first number. numbers coming up: 600, 355, 150, 750, 1,000, 1,000, almost 1,300, 2,250. So I got a range from between 150 and 2,250. That sounds like the typical project cost estimation. It goes in any direction. And there is a reason for this. The reason for this, I was once told, is that our brain is wired to make estimations and not to calculate exact numbers. The reason being biological and being survival. If at some point in time I'm walking across a place and some wild animal jumps at me or tries to attack me, then I don't have time to calculate the distance and the speed of the animal and the speed with which I can run and so on before deciding what do I do. I just have to make a decision in a split second whether or not I climb a tree or run or try to attack the animal and hope for the best. I make those decisions based on estimations, very quick estimations, not on exact calculations. So exact calculations are tough for the human brain. A way around this is by using relative estimations. If I would say to you, and thank you for the comment, Armory, if I would say to you that a completely filled bowl would contain 750 candies, what would your estimation be of the number of candies in the bowl in the picture? So what we see happening here is that the estimations are getting much closer to each other, between 500 and close to 700. That range is much smaller. The reason is that relative estimations are much easier for us to do than absolute calculations. And so if I compare this to projects, if I have multiple solutions, potential solutions that I can compare, it's much easier to say this solution will probably be more difficult to develop. It will take more time. That solution might be easier to use. A third solution might be easier to maintain. And so I could compare different solutions, their costs and their benefits relatively to each other. And it would help me decide which is the best solution to select to go forward with, without doing the exact calculation of how much each solution costs to develop, to maintain, and how much benefits they will bring. So knowing different solution options is an important part to identify the ones with most potential. There is another reason why multiple solutions are interesting to have, and that is that they help us understand why stakeholders believe their solution will actually work. We've all seen a situation where a stakeholder comes to us with a high-level goal, like improve the customer experience, and a very specific solution. And if we understand why that solution works by comparing it with alternatives that the stakeholder may or may not like, then we can more easily identify alternatives that also fulfill the stakeholders' requirements, but maybe in a cheaper or faster way. So let me give you an example. Suppose some kind of office, the postal office in Belgium, is seeing that customers don't like to stand in line for too long. So they initiate a new project. They say, okay, we want to improve the customer experience, and we want to do so by implementing an online reservation system. Because if people have the ability to reserve their slot online, they can be sure that they won't have to wait for a long time. The challenge for us, what you see here is a very, very basic benefit map with, on the one hand, on the one side, the goal, which is too high level. It doesn't pass the strategy sniff test. And on the other hand, a very specific solution. Our challenge, and we can do so by creating the benefit map together with our stakeholders, is to find out what's in between, what connects these two things. So we use the benefit map as a workshop facilitation tool or technique, and we find out that actually a sub-goal is reduce the waiting time. We want to reduce the waiting time, and that will help us improve the customer experience. And there are a number of options For example, making sure that the waiting time is short. Sorry, I'm a little bit confused here because of the animation. So improve the customer experience is a little bit too high level. So we fine-tune it a bit by saying we want to improve the waiting experience. That's more specific. And one way of improving the waiting experience is ensuring a short waiting time. And the online reservation system is a way to do so. However, a technique that we can use to explore this further is the say yes to no technique. By saying no, I mean, what if we could hypothetically not have the solution or aspects of the solution that our stakeholder is proposing? For example, we could have the conversation with our stakeholders. What if we would have no reservations? What if that, for whatever reason, would not be possible? What would the consequence be? The stakeholder might say, then we wouldn't have a short waiting time. Can we think of an alternative for having, so that gives us, so that we, without reservations, still can try to make the waiting time short? Well, maybe we can give an indicator of how busy at different times the office is. And that might nudge people into choosing a time to come to us when it's not too busy, and thereby reducing the waiting time for everyone. And you can start comparing, because thanks to the exercise of thinking about alternatives by saying yes to no, by saying no to the initial proposal, we kind of discover, okay, what is key here? Key here is that we find ways to trigger people into maybe selecting a different time. And that can be done by having a reservation, but it can also be done by having a busyness indicator on our website, for example, that is static and much easier to develop. Another example, an online reservation system. Why should it have to be online? The answer could be because we want to have 24/7 access. We want people to be able to make a reservation all day long and all night long. Could we think of an alternative, like a phone system? Maybe, but it might be more expensive because we need to hire people to be at the phone. And so there again, you see, okay, we can think of alternatives, and thinking of these alternatives by hypothetically saying that a certain solution is not possible gives us an insight into what the stakeholder actually wants, what the stakeholder believes are the key enablers to achieve the strategic goal, why the stakeholder believes his or her proposed solution is a good one. If we have that conversation, we can kind of fill in the blanks between, on the one hand, the goal and sub-goal, and on the other hand, the initially proposed solution, which is, for example, ensuring a short waiting time, ensuring a correct and predictable waiting time, and a pleasurable waiting time and comfortable. We want to make sure people are comfortable while they are waiting. That will improve the waiting experience. We want to make sure the waiting time is short, and we want to make sure the waiting time is correct, or the waiting is correct. People cannot skip ahead. And by finding these enablers, we can again start to think about alternative solutions. For example, this machine where you can just draw a number and you know, okay, I'm number 15, so that means there are maybe 3 more people before me. It gives you a predictable waiting time, and that might be enough to improve the waiting experience and the customer experience, or it might not be enough. But that conversation is what you're trying to trigger by using these enablers in the middle between the goals and the solutions on your benefit map. These are 2 interesting solutions with a very different cost and maybe also a very different benefit. And it opens up interesting creative ideas, like this one in Thailand. This is how they solve the waiting experience, or how they improve the waiting experience in Thailand. It is comfortable. People are sitting on a chair, relaxed. It is predictable. You know how many shoes are in front of you, so you know how long roughly you'll have to wait. And it is fair, it is correct. Because of the line of shoes, people cannot skip ahead of you. And I think this is a really good example, because often we can solve things to some extent by using solutions that don't require IT. IT is very powerful, but also very costly to build and maintain. And so this is an example of how powerful creativity can be and how creativity can be triggered by thinking more consciously about the benefit map and about the enablers, the solution-independent solutions, if you will, to trigger that creativity. So we have the solutions, we have the goals, we have the enablers in between, we actually have our complete benefit map. The next step is to be aware of the fact that that benefit map is nice in theory, but does it work in reality? Does it bring us the benefits that we actually promise in the business case? And what typically happens here is that project managers bring along their famous golden triangle. And in Belgium, in Dutch, it's actually sometimes called the devil's triangle because it's sometimes devilish. The idea is that if you manage your project well, if you manage time, scope, and budget well, you can deliver a quality deliverable, a quality output, quality result, and it will give you success. So if we apply this to our implementation plan, if we create based on our benefit map and implementation plan, we say, okay, let's look at the different solution options. Let's define the scope. We say, okay, we're going to go for the Thailand solution. We implement a row of shoes and a row of chairs. That will help us implement some of the enablers and thus help us achieve some of the goals to the extent that we think that is enough for us. This is the investment we are willing to make. So we have our implementation plan, we have our scope, we define the order in which we are going to implement the different parts of the solution, and the project starts. Now, something very dangerous has just happened. What happened? What dangerous thing just occurred? So I will show it again. We have our benefit map with all the IDs. Indeed, we lost sight of our goals. We define our scope, we define our implementation plan, and we start the project. And often what you see is that when you start the project, you are focused on delivering the solution and not focused on the goals anymore. And here again, by using the benefit map in every single meeting, saying this is what we are proposing to do in order to achieve the goals here very clearly with clear, smart metrics, gives you focus on that goal, because it's not just a matter of managing time, scope, and budget in order to achieve those goals. The story is actually a little bit more complicated. First of all, quality is not a consequence of good time, scope, and budget management. Quality is a conscious choice. It's choice where BAs can be involved in deciding or in helping decide how good should the product be in order to achieve certain objectives, in order to achieve certain benefits. So firstly, quality needs to be managed as a choice, a parameter, just as well as time, scope, and budget. And if you manage those four well, you can create value. I say you can because you are not sure. If you look at the benefit map, how sure are you that actually the solution that you propose is going to bring you or be a good implementation of the enablers and thus bring you closer to the goals you set forth? How sure are you of that? Usually, you're not 100% sure. So that means there may be lines that are actually broken visually. It may be the case that solutions don't always realize the enablers, are not always good implementations of the enablers, and the enablers don't necessarily help you achieve the goal. In order to be sure, you should be testing those lines, or at least the most uncertain ones. We can believe that it is true. We can believe that a row of shoes will make people will improve people's waiting experience by ensuring a correct and predictable waiting time. But are we sure that people are not going to skip the line anyway? Maybe we are, maybe we're not. If you're not sure, maybe we need to test. And so instead of believing that whatever we have written down in the benefit map is actually true, maybe we should run a few tests, do a few validations, or to quote Mr. Deming, in God we trust, all others must bring data. So what does this look like? Basically, it means that the implementation plan should be complemented with a validation plan. At each step of implementation, we are not only delivering a new piece of the solution, but we should also try to test, is this helping us getting closer to that goal we are trying to achieve? Is this helping us close that strategy execution gap? Is the line in the benefit map, is the connection, does it exist? Yes or no? So at any point in time, with any small slice that we release, we should try to measure, are we getting closer? If yes, perfect, we can continue. If no, what should we change, or should we stop the project altogether? And so the implementation plan is one thing, but it's focusing on getting the deliverable done. The validation plan, which we should merge into it, helps us measure at each step along the way, are we getting closer to that goal? And again, here the benefit map is an interesting technique because it helps me identify the critical path. What is the path that gives me the most value for the least investment? It could be the red one, the red line here. We can easily highlight it. We can discuss it. We can see if people are aligned around this or have different opinions. And if we find out, if we discover together, this is the critical path, this is what we believe the smallest investment with the biggest potential return, the biggest potential benefit, how sure are we that that is actually true, that those connections are actually true? And if we are not too sure, if we may be only 75% or 50% sure, what validations can we do that help us identify, before we do the entire implementation, whether or not we are on the right track? So there again, the benefit map is a very good visual aid to discover that critical path and have that conversation around certainty and validations. So that covers the 3 steps. First, we try to pin down the goals. The strategy sniff test can help us find out what those goals are and whether or not we need to fine-tune them to make them more concrete, more tangible, to give us more guidance. Then we find out the enablers. We can start from a proposed solution, but we try to figure out why our stakeholder believes that that solution will work. What are potential alternatives? What is the difference, the advantage, the disadvantages of different alternatives over each other, comparing them relatively. And finally, we are aware of the fact that we are not sure of the connections in the benefit map. So we try to find out what are the things we need to validate before going all the way in our implementation. What I've been using here is a very basic version of the benefit map with the goals, sub-goals, enablers, and solution features or solution aspects. There are a number of different variations on there. I'm highlighting 3. A first one is the impact map that you may have heard of. It's basically a benefit map with a little bit more structure. It says what is the goal we are trying to achieve, and then it specifically adds who is going to help us achieve the goal, or who do we need to achieve that goal. And so it makes it personal, and it gives you that kind of additional hint towards potential change management. Who do we need to rely on to achieve the goal, and can we bring those people on board? Or put in a different way, how can certain groups of people help us achieve the goal? And so that's definitely one thing that you can check out as a different variation if you want to highlight the people aspect and the change aspect. A second one, which is a bit more elaborate, is the benefit dependency network. What is interesting here is that it highlights the role of technology. Often these days, technology can help us come closer to our goals. So technology is explicitly mentioned in this version of the benefit map. And it also highlights the difference between sustaining changes, a change that we make, for example, in a process that continues to exist, and enabling changes. For example, a training is a typical example, a training to help people go from a current way of working to a new way of working. So that's also something interesting to highlight in some situations. Depending on your organization, depending on the type of project, you can choose which type of benefit map works better for you, for your team, for your stakeholders. A third related approach is OKRs, objectives and key results, where objectives is actually very closely aligned to the goals we have mentioned here, and the key results are very clear milestones. How do we measure that we are making progress? So it kind of lets you check, lets you implement, lets you make more explicit that validation, those validation steps. So to summarize, lean strategy execution as an approach is very well supported by a tool like the benefit map, by the techniques to help populate the benefit map, to have that conversation with your stakeholders. Has the 3 steps that we mentioned at the beginning. So strategy, pin down goals, where it's about making choices, be specific about the choices you make without going into too much detail early on, but be more specific, then we are going to improve the customer experience. Exposing enabler is about finding those true needs without thinking in terms of a specific solution just yet, and opening up the conversation to alternatives so that we can compare them. And finally, let's create that feedback loop where we learn by validating whether or not the solution that we have in mind that we are implementing works, whether or not that solution brings us closer to our actual benefits we want to achieve. This approach does have an impact on the role of the business analyst. And so I want to close with highlighting that in the strategy part, it's important that the business analyst becomes a value manager, so that he manages together with the team, that he keeps focused on what is the value we are trying to achieve here, and are we getting closer to that? That he also is an opportunity manager. What are the opportunities for getting closer to those goals in a quicker and cheaper way? What alternatives can we come up with? What creative solutions, like the Thailand solution with a row of chairs and a line of shoes? What is our Thailand solution for this specific problem or opportunity? And thirdly, be an assumption manager. What are the things that could go wrong? What are the uncertainties in this benefit map? And what are the validations we can do to find out as soon as possible whether or not we are on the right track? So those are things that I believe the benefit map can help you in taking up these 3 roles as a BA. With that, I would like to thank you very much for being here. And if there are any questions, we have 2 minutes. Maybe it's just enough for the raffle. In any case, my contact details are in the slides that will be shared with you, or already have been shared with you. So don't hesitate to get in touch if you have questions, suggestions, or whatever on a soundboard on this topic. Thank you very much.
Okay, I see a lot of thank yous going up. Philip, thank you. Filip, thank you so much. Great presentation.